All right, we eat tonight.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3.
A cartoon that started in 1989 has predicted the future with impossible accuracy. They showed Donald Trump as president 16 years before it happened. They predicted smartwatches, video calls, and even specific sporting event outcomes. But their most chilling prediction involves what's coming in 2026. Recent episodes show society breaking down in ways that match current news headlines perfectly. From AI rebellion to economic collapse, every detail is eerily specific. The writers claim it's just comedy, but the evidence suggests something much darker is happening. Horse meat in school lunches. Back in 1994, there was an episode of The Simpsons that seemed like just a silly joke at the time. It was called Sweet Seymour Skinner's Ba Da Ses Song, and it aired on April 28th. In one short moment, the school lunch lady, Doris, was seen preparing food using a huge barrel that had a strange label on it. It said, "Assorted horse parts, now with more testicles." It was supposed to be funny, showing how bad the cafeteria food in public schools could be. Nobody thought much of it. It was just a cartoon after all. But then something happened. Almost 19 years later, in 2013, real news reports started coming out across Europe. Tests revealed that food labeled as beef in the UK, Ireland, and France was actually mixed with horse meat. Some of it had no beef at all. People were furious. Supermarket shelves were emptied. Companies apologized. And everyone started wondering what exactly they had been eating. Some people remembered that old Simpsons episode and realized the joke wasn't so funny anymore. It felt like the cartoon had seen it coming long before the world even noticed. News outlets like the BBC covered the scandal non-stop. Even though The Simpsons didn't cause it or predict it in a serious way, the connection was hard to ignore. Springfield Elementary had served horse meat to kids in a joke. Almost 2 decades later, Europe discovered it had unknowingly done the same thing to millions of families. Three-eyed fish. Way back in 1990, there was another episode called 2 Cars in Every Garage and 3 Eyes on Every Fish. It aired on November 1st, and in it, Bart went fishing near the nuclear power plant. What he pulled out of the water shocked everyone. It was a strange orange fish with 3 eyes. They named it Blinky. The town was horrified, and it became a symbol of how the power plant was poisoning the environment. At the time, viewers laughed. It was an obvious joke about pollution and radiation. But then, in 2011, something real happened. A fisherman in Argentina caught a 3-eyed fish in a reservoir close to a nuclear facility in Cordoba. People were stunned. The fish looked disturbingly similar to Blinky. The image spread fast. Then, in the years that followed, more reports came in. A 3-eyed catfish was found in Brooklyn. Another odd fish was caught in a New York State lake. Suddenly, what once seemed like a weird cartoon fish was popping up in the real world. Scientists didn't rush to say it was caused by radiation, but they also didn't say it was normal. Pollution in water can cause mutations. And while 3-eyed fish aren't completely unheard of, they're extremely rare. The fact that one showed up so close to a nuclear facility made it feel like more than just a coincidence. People started saying The Simpsons had done it again. They didn't just imagine something strange. They put it on TV years before anything like it appeared in real life. Autocorrect frustrations. In 1994, long before smartphones and texting became part of daily life, The Simpsons saw it coming. In an episode called Lisa on Ice, something funny happened that turned out to be strangely true years later. The school bully Kearney pulls out a new gadget called the Apple Newton. It was one of the first digital assistants, released in 1993. He tries to write a note that says, "Beat up Martin," but the device trying to read his handwriting, changes it to "Eat up, Martha." The joke was quick, but it stuck. It showed just how bad early autocorrect could be. What's shocking is that this exact kind of mistake became normal years later. In the 2000s and 2010s, smartphones like the iPhone made autocorrect a regular part of texting. And almost everyone has had a moment where they meant to say something serious, but the phone changed it into something ridiculous. One of the most famous ones is when someone types a curse word, but it turns into ducking instead. It drives people crazy. But here's the twist. When Apple engineers were building the iPhone years later, they actually remembered that Simpsons joke. "Eat up, Martha" became a warning to get it right this time. The team didn't want their phone to become another joke. Even today, nearly 30 years later, autocorrect still messes things up, just like that silly Newton did. That one short scene predicted a big part of modern life. Censorship of Michelangelo's David. Back in 1990, The Simpsons did something else that would later feel like it came true. In an episode called Itchy and Scratchy and Marge, aired on December 20th of that year, Marge gets angry about violent cartoons. She tries to get them banned, but soon the fight grows bigger and turns into a campaign about what kind of art should be allowed. That's when a famous statue, Michelangelo's David, comes to town. It's completely nude, and some people in Springfield are so upset they try to get it covered with pants. Marge, who had started the censorship battle, suddenly changes her mind. She says the statue is art and should stay the way it is. That moment shows how people sometimes want to censor things until it affects something they personally respect. More than 25 years later, in 2016, something eerily similar happened in real life. In St. Petersburg, Russia, a copy of the statue was put on display. Just like in the show, some people were shocked and wanted it covered. One woman even started a petition asking to put a fig leaf on it. It got so serious that a public vote was held. In the end, they left the statue alone. But the fact that people were having the exact same argument so many years later felt like life was copying the cartoon. U.S. wins Olympic gold in curling. It was February 14, 2010, when The Simpsons aired an episode that seemed fun and silly at the time. In that episode, Homer and Marge joined the United States Olympic curling team. It was the Vancouver Winter Olympics, and somehow, this cartoon couple helped Team USA win the gold medal in curling. They beat Sweden for the top spot. Viewers laughed, because in real life, the US wasn't exactly a curling powerhouse. Before that episode aired, America had only won one medal in curling, a bronze in 2006. Winning gold seemed like a joke. But then, something strange happened. In 2018, 8 years after that episode, the real US men's curling team shocked the world by winning the gold medal at the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. And just like in the show, they beat Sweden in the final. It wasn't just a win, it was a total surprise. Team USA had been struggling in the early rounds, and nobody expected them to even make it to the final. But they turned things around and pulled off an incredible victory. Fans who remembered the old Simpsons episode were stunned. It felt like the show had predicted it all, moment by moment, stone by stone. Some people said it was just luck, but others couldn't believe how close the match in the cartoon was to what actually happened in real life. The writers later explained that they based the story on curling's rising popularity at the time. But still, the exact matchup, the exact result, and even the unlikely victory made it feel like something much bigger than a coincidence. FIFA corruption exposed. On March 30th, 2014, a new episode aired where Homer became a referee at the World Cup. The story was about how deep the corruption ran in international football. In the cartoon, FIFA was shown as a shady organization full of bribes and cheating. One official was even arrested in the middle of the tournament. It was bold and almost too real. At that time, people had been whispering about FIFA scandals for years, but nothing official had happened. Then came May 2015. Just 1 year after the episode, real life caught up to the show. The FBI and IRS led a massive investigation that exposed FIFA's darkest secrets. They arrested officials in Zurich. Dozens of top names were charged with bribery, money laundering, and racketeering. The headlines were brutal. The world watched in shock as some of the most powerful people in football were dragged into court. And suddenly, everyone remembered the Simpsons episode. Once again, it had all played out before the public ever knew. An official being taken away in handcuffs, just like the cartoon. And it didn't stop there. That same episode also showed Germany winning the World Cup. The show had Germany beat Brazil in the final. Now, in real life, Germany didn't play Brazil in the final, but they did beat Brazil in one of the most unforgettable matches in football history. That game ended 7-1. Then, Germany went on to win the World Cup in July 2014 by defeating Argentina. So even though the matchup wasn't exactly the same, the outcome was still true. Germany became world champions, just like the show had suggested. When the real FIFA arrests happened in 2015, people couldn't believe how close the cartoon had come. Articles and blogs rushed to say the same thing. The Simpsons had done it again. They had predicted not just one huge moment, but two: a world champion and a worldwide scandal. The writers later admitted they had based Homer's story on real rumors about FIFA. It wasn't magic, but the timing was too perfect. The world hadn't seen anything yet, but The Simpsons had already drawn it, joked about it, and aired it on television for everyone to see. Greece's debt default. In January 2012, during an episode of The Simpsons called Politically Inept with Homer Simpson, there was a quick moment that most people might have missed. Homer was ranting on a cable news show, and while he talked, a little joke ran across the bottom of the screen. It said, "Europe puts Greece on eBay." At the time, it sounded like a silly line meant to get a quick laugh. But just 3 years later, that joke started to feel eerily close to reality. By June 2015, Greece was in deep financial trouble. The country had borrowed so much money that it couldn't keep up with the payments. That month, Greece missed a huge payment to the International Monetary Fund, becoming the first developed nation to ever do that. People across the world began to panic. News outlets everywhere started wondering if Greece would leave the Eurozone completely. The financial crisis in Greece was no longer just about debt, it was about survival. The government was cutting spending, unemployment was high, and families were struggling to get by. Greece wasn't literally being sold on eBay, of course, but it felt like the country was being stripped down piece by piece. The line from The Simpsons suddenly didn't feel like a joke. It captured the pain and the chaos of what was really happening. Somehow, the writers of the show had summed it all up in one strange but perfect sentence, years before it came true. Boson equation. Back in September 1998, they aired another episode called The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace. In this one, Homer decided he wanted to be like Thomas Edison and become an inventor. At one point in the episode, he's standing in front of a chalkboard filled with a mess of numbers and equations. It looked random. It was meant to be funny, showing how little Homer actually understood science. But over a decade later, scientists took a closer look at that chalkboard, and they were shocked. One of the equations Homer wrote down turned out to be very close to the real calculation for the mass of the Higgs boson, a particle that had been theorized back in the 1960s but wasn't officially discovered until 2012. The Higgs boson, sometimes called the God particle, is what gives other particles their mass. Scientists at CERN finally confirmed its existence in 2012, which won the Nobel Prize in Physics the following year. But The Simpsons had scribbled a close estimate of it in a throwaway gag 14 years earlier. It turns out, one of the writers on the show David X. Cohen actually studied physics and computer science. He even brought in his physicist friend, David Shiminovich, to help make the board look more realistic. They probably used scientific guesses that were floating around in academic circles at the time, but still, it was so accurate that even Time magazine joked that The Simpsons had discovered the Higgs Boson before anyone else. Lady Gaga's high-flying halftime show in May 2012, The Simpsons aired an episode called Lisa Goes Gaga. It was season 23, episode 22. In it, Lady Gaga arrived in Springfield in the wildest way possible. She flew through the sky above the crowd, held up by cables, wearing a shiny silver outfit, and even playing a keyboard guitar mid-air. At one point, she had sparks shooting from her bra. The whole scene was over the top, outrageous and funny, just like Gaga's real concerts. It was meant to be a parody of her real-life performances. Then, in February 2017, something strange happened. During the Super Bowl halftime show, Lady Gaga performed live in front of millions. And just like in the cartoon, she descended from the roof of the stadium on cables, floating in the air in a glittery outfit. It was one of the biggest TV events of the year. People instantly noticed how similar it looked to the Simpsons episode from 5 years earlier. The harness, the flying entrance, even the energy. It was all there. Gaga herself even admitted it felt weird, saying it gave her chills because it reminded her of the cartoon. Nobody's saying The Simpsons caused her to fly, of course. Other artists have used aerial stunts too. But the fact that the episode showed Gaga doing that exact thing years before it happened felt more than just a coincidence. It was detailed and oddly accurate. Once again, The Simpsons had predicted a major pop culture moment before it became real. Mass surveillance and the NSA now go back to July 2007, when The Simpsons movie was released. There's a short scene where the Simpson family is on the run, hiding on a train. Marge tries to calm Lisa by saying, "It's not like the government is listening to everybody's conversations." Right after that, the scene cuts to a giant building where dozens of government agents are spying on people's calls in real time, including the one Marge just made. At the time, it was just a funny exaggeration. Nobody thought the government was actually doing that. But in 2013, everything changed. Edward Snowden, a former NSA worker, leaked secret documents that revealed the US government really had been spying on people in ways most had never imagined. They were collecting massive amounts of phone and internet data from millions of people. What seemed like an impossible joke in the movie suddenly looked a lot like real life. The leaked files showed how serious and widespread the spying was. Newspapers around the world picked up the story. The Guardian released the first reports in June 2013, and it shook people's trust in privacy. Suddenly, that Simpsons movie scene didn't seem so funny. It seemed like a warning that nobody took seriously. This wasn't just a lucky guess. Back in 2007, the general public didn't know how far surveillance had gone. But The Simpsons somehow captured it perfectly, 6 years before the truth came out. It made people wonder if the writers were just really clever, or if they had some kind of strange ability to see the future. A deadly submarine disaster. Back in January 2006, The Simpsons aired another episode that seemed harmless at the time. It was called Homer's Paternity Coot, Season 17, Episode 10. In that story, Homer finds out he might have a different father, a treasure hunter. To bond with him, Homer joins him on an undersea mission. They're looking for a lost Spanish treasure ship named Piso Mojado. The two of them use small, one-person submarines to search the ocean floor. But something goes wrong. Homer's tiny sub gets stuck in coral. He loses contact. oxygen runs low. He nearly dies before being rescued at the last second. In the end, it was just a tense but funny adventure. Nothing serious. But fast forward 17 years to June 2023. A real submersible called Titan, carrying 5 people, went missing while diving to see the wreck of the Titanic. It was a private tourist trip. At first, everyone hoped they would be rescued. But soon, it was confirmed that the sub had imploded deep underwater. All 5 passengers were killed. The news was heartbreaking. What made it even more eerie was something a Simpsons writer said later. He had actually gone on dives inside the Titan sub before. Each time, there were communication failures. Looking back, it made people wonder how safe that sub ever was. When fans remembered the 2006 episode, they couldn't ignore the similarities. Both had small submarines, deep ocean dives, technical problems, and life-or-death moments. In The Simpsons, Homer got lucky. In real life, there was no happy ending. The episode had been written for laughs, but after 2023, it felt like a silent warning. People on social media pointed out the parallel. Some even said it felt like another prediction. But again, the truth is more chilling. The show didn't predict the Titan disaster. What it did do was touch on the very real risks of pushing limits, especially in extreme places like the deep sea. Black market grease theft. Back in 1998, something strange and funny happened on The Simpsons. It was the first episode of Season 10, and it aired on August 23rd. Homer, always chasing a quick way to make money, discovered that you could sell used fryer grease for cash. He dragged Bart into his new plan, and together they started sneaking around town stealing grease. They sucked it out of fast food joints and even the school cafeteria vents. Things got messy when groundskeeper Willie showed up. Turns out, he was also a grease thief, and Homer had stepped into his turf. The whole thing blew up in Homer's face, as it always does. At the time, the idea felt completely ridiculous. Who on earth would go around stealing used grease? But something strange happened not long after. By the late 2000s, that exact thing started happening in real life. Used cooking oil, also called yellow grease, suddenly became valuable because of the rise of biofuels. What was once trash became liquid gold. Restaurants threw their old oil into dumpsters out back, and thieves started coming at night to siphon it out. In 2008, the New York Times even reported on it. One man had stolen 300 gallons of fryer oil from a Burger King. People laughed in disbelief, but police and restaurant owners weren't laughing. Grease theft became so common that by the 2010s, it was costing businesses up to $75 million a year. The term grease bandit jumped right out of cartoons and into real police reports. What started as a silly subplot with Homer had somehow become a real black market crime. The Simpsons had predicted it almost perfectly, even though no one took it seriously at the time. Rampant virtual reality addiction. It was Season 28, Episode 2, and it aired on October 2nd. Mr. Burns got his hands on a high-tech virtual reality headset. He used it to create a fake family, one that lived only inside his headset. At first, it seemed harmless, but soon, Burns didn't want to spend time with real people anymore. He became obsessed with the fake world. The Simpsons also tried on the headsets and got lost in those digital places. And in a different episode called Bart to the Future, which aired way back in 2000, Bart was shown as an adult, miserable and alone, hiding behind a VR visor to escape his life. These stories were funny, but they were also warning us. They showed how dangerous it could be to replace real connections with fake ones. At the time, hardly anyone had used virtual reality. It was something for science fiction, but slowly, the world started catching up. By the mid-2020s, VR and AR were everywhere. The metaverse became a hot topic. Kids and adults spent hours inside games, virtual meetings, concerts, and even digital shopping malls. Big tech companies pushed out better and more addictive headsets every year. In 2023, Apple even released its own Vision Pro headset, joining Oculus Quest and PlayStation VR. By 2025, real studies showed that too much time in VR could lead to digital addiction and social isolation. Some people were starting to forget how to live in the real world, exactly like The Simpsons had warned us almost a decade earlier. When Marge said it was okay to play in virtual worlds, but not to forget the real one, it felt like a gentle reminder. But now, as we move toward 2026, that message feels urgent. VR is no longer a fun side hobby. It's shaping how people live, work, and escape. What felt like a wild joke in a cartoon turned out to be one of the most accurate warnings we could have gotten. Robot takeover at Itchy and Scratchy Land. Back in 1994, something strange happened in a Simpsons episode. It was called Itchy and Scratchy Land and aired on October 2nd during Season 6. The family visits a theme park that looks a lot like Disneyland, but everything there is based on the violent cartoon characters Itchy and Scratchy. The place is full of high-tech robot characters, and at first, everything seems exciting. Homer even jokes, "Nothing can possibly go wrong." But then, it all does. The robots suddenly go crazy and start attacking the guests. The park turns into chaos. The only way the Simpsons survive is by using camera flashes to shut the robots down. At the time, it was just funny and over the top. But now, it feels more like a warning. In the 2020s, we're actually seeing machines doing things we used to think only humans could do. By 2023, artificial intelligence was writing articles, driving cars, and even beating people at chess. But one story from that same year really stood out. A chess robot grabbed a little boy's finger and broke it during a game. It wasn't evil, just a malfunction. But it reminded everyone that these machines can still hurt people. That silly moment in The Simpsons where robots go wild suddenly doesn't feel so silly anymore. Homer's goofy line about nothing going wrong now sounds like the kind of blind trust people have in technology. And as we move closer to 2026, the big question is whether we've gone too far without thinking about what could go wrong. Looming global food shortages. In 1995, one more episode gave us another surprising glimpse of the future. Season 7, Episode 5, aired on October 15th and was called Lisa the Vegetarian. Lisa visits a petting zoo and bonds with a baby lamb. After that, she can't bring herself to eat meat anymore. The episode shows her struggle as the only one in her family who wants to stop eating animals. Homer doesn't get it at all. There's even a scene where he throws a barbecue and ends up launching an entire roasted pig into the sky. It's funny and chaotic, but deep down, it was saying something bigger. Even though the episode was about a little girl's personal choice, it was really touching on something the world is still talking about. How do we feed a growing population without destroying the planet? As of 2025, news stories had already started warning people about rising food prices and shortages in some parts of the world. Farming animals uses huge amounts of water, land, and resources. It also creates greenhouse gases. Experts now say that eating less meat and growing more plants could help slow down climate change and prevent food crises. Lisa's decision to stop eating meat might have seemed small in 1995, but today it looks like she was ahead of her time. In one touching moment, Apu shows Lisa a secret rooftop garden. He tells her it's possible to grow your own food. That quiet scene held a powerful message about being self-reliant and thoughtful. As the world faces tougher challenges around food, water, and weather, That simple idea feels more important than ever. The Simpsons has always been a cartoon meant to make people laugh. But when you look closely, the show often held up a mirror to our future. It warned us, even if it was through silly jokes or wild plots. In 1994, they showed robots going rogue. In 1992, they showed weather spinning out of control. In 1995, they questioned how we eat and what it means for the planet. Now it's 2025, and the world they joked about doesn't seem so far off. The big difference is that back then, it was just a cartoon. Now, it's real life.